everybody. This is Dr. Elsie Coe with Lead Physician. I'm here with Dr. Bob Underwood, who's on faculty at Lead Physician, and we're here to give you a little trick on how to make leadership easier for you and how to deal with conflict and confusion with this specific leadership skill. So, thank you for being on here today. So, Dr. Robert Underwood is a chief medical officer of San Juan Regional Medical Center in Farmington, New Mexico, and has been doing leadership training for interprofessional teams. And he's written a book. We're going to talk about that later. And I am the CEO and founder of Lead Physicians. So thank you so much for being here tonight. What is this essential leadership skill for physicians? And the bottom line, it's a skill so that you can communicate better, so you can make decisions easier. You can deal with things on the fly because you have something prepared. What is it that we're talking about here? And we're going to go to the next slide and have Bob introduce that.
When we talk about what are essential leadership skills, one of the discussion points that I have is starting with a leadership philosophy. So with the leadership philosophy, you really kind of break it down for your team. What are your expectations? But more importantly, what are those expectations based upon? So a lot of it is actually starts with a self-exploration of what are your values? Why do you do what you do in a leadership role? What are your expectations of yourself? What are the expectations of others? But it really starts with your values and why are we here? And in healthcare, I think that a lot of us start with some of the same presuppositions of why we are in the role that we're in, whether it's clinical or otherwise. So
Right.
it helps us to establish the why in talking to our teams, and then when I talk about the leadership philosophy, I'll also talk about how do you write that, and then kind of what do you do with it once you have it written. Those are two very important components of the how of your leadership philosophy.
Yeah. So if you've never even thought about leading with values before, this is going to give you a great introduction to what that means. And I'm going to share you a little story of what happened to me and why I failed so miserably back in 2006 when I became a medical director of a surgery center for the first time and was told to lead groups of employees underneath me that they've been recruiting. They kept adding more and more employees to the surgery center, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And without having an intentional concept of the leadership that I represent, not what that someone else is telling me to do, not the concepts of leadership that I learned from medical school, which wasn't much at all, which is command and control. That's what I did. That's what I stood for. That was my mantra. That was the culture I developed back then that allowed me to fall flat on my face. It's like walking through your job and your life with your mask on because you're not really yourself if you don't think about the values that you represent and who you really are, and you're being, not the person that your mom wants you to be, or that your partner wants you to be, or your boss wants you to be. It's who you really represent. How do you do that? And then I actually was told in 2009 that I made each and every employee cry at one time in their time with me during in a Christmas party. And boy, was that a big blow to my ego and to my whole world. And that's why I started this whole thing. Okay. And it made me realize that I needed to change. And what was it that I needed to change? And when you start learning to lead with values, and we're going to talk to you about what that is, you're going to see your life completely change. It'll become a lot more fulfilling. You're going to start gaining trust of your employees. You're going to be able to deal with conflict and confusion and any disruption with much more ease. So, and to now, when we're talking about today, because of my leadership skills, I've gained a lot of trust with my bosses, my employees, my direct reports, my colleagues, and was able to advance into a CMO role, which I never even thought back in the day that I would ever get into. I never thought I was a leader. But anyone can be a leader. You can learn, and this is the basic concept behind that. So go ahead, Bob.
So, and I agree with everything that you said. The skill set around leadership is something that can be learned and practiced. And in fact, when I do this discussion, I talk about often the adult learning cycle and how we go about this process. And unfortunately, a lot of us in medical school were see one, do one, teach one. That doesn't work here. So when we start, we talk about a number of things. Again, remember I said at the beginning that we start with talking about our values. What are the values that really drive us in our day-to-day world? And so some of mine are honor, which is being truthful. I value also teamwork and working together as a team, and this helps you start your discussion about where is your baseline. So when you start putting your values into action, then your values become, so values in action become virtues, and virtues or repeated virtuous behavior, which are really based upon your values, they really become a defining understanding of what is your character. And that's what people really notice. I mean, they can hear what your values are and they can see virtuous behavior, but when they repeat it over and over again, people that you lead, people that you work with will start to understand what is your character. And then if you take the time to build a strong character, again, based on the values and virtues, that in turn develops into trust. And trust is the foundation of any leadership interaction that you're going to have. So, trust is really key. You can't really be in a leadership role if the people that you're trying to lead don't trust you. And so, it really, again, goes values to virtues, virtues to character, character to trust. So, don't let your team have any reason to think that you have ulterior motives or that you're out for someone other than them, or that you're doing anything outside of the values that you've predefined.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much, Bob. That leads to the foundation of leadership. So, when you think about how leading of values affects your life, these are some of the things I want you to think about. Okay. How do you get your people to do their very best? How do you represent your best self? How do you make relationships stronger? How do you make difficult decisions? How do you build trust? How do you get people in the office to not have this attitude of that's not my job description, so I'm not going to help mop the floor, or I'm not going to do her job because she's the nurse and I'm the tech. When you have when you as the leader set the tone for the culture, it always starts from the top. No matter what they say, it starts from the top, and that's what defines the culture of the organization and your office. So think about that as Bob kind of shows you how to write your own leadership philosophy statement.
So there are a couple of things that are part of a leadership philosophy that you want to be able to write down. And so we'll talk about the format for this here in a little bit. But in a sense, what you want to make sure that you're covering is, what does leadership mean to me? In other words, why am I here? What is leadership versus management? We talk about that a little bit too. But what is leadership in terms of what it means to me to be a leader and to help others be successful? Then you go through and kind of list out what are those personal values. And in a minute, you're going to see all of mine. Then kind of operating principles, which is really you talk about, okay, how am I going to do these things based on what I've already listed in my values? What am I going to do that supports those values? And it also helps set, what do you guys expect from me? So you really set the expectations. What are the expectations that you can have of me? And in turn, write down, here are the expectations that I have of you. Now, this isn't going through their job description and explaining what I expect from you. This is how I want you to be a team member for the greater part of what we're doing together as a team. And then I also go through and we talk about what are non-negotiables. In other words, what are things that just, we're not going to tolerate as a group. And I say we on purpose. Yes, it's technically coming from me as a leader, but we as a group have to live up to these expectations as a whole. And then priorities, what's important? What order are we going to accomplish these? Your values are going to even be in the appropriate order. Then personal idiosyncrasies. In other words, a lot of leadership is communication between the team and the leader. And so I think it's really important to set out, okay, what are you just not going to tolerate? I, as a leader, will not tolerate this or that. And I'll talk about a couple of mine. But it's important for your team to understand those too, so that they don't kind of cross over those barriers or lines, knowing that you're going to probably intervene if you see any of those things happening and relatively quickly. And then the last one is your commitment for feedback. Here are my expectations. I really do expect you to tell me whether or not I'm living up to these expectations. And I actually ask my team members periodically, am I fulfilling the obligations that I put forth in my leadership philosophy?
Great. So, usually during this is just a little flavor of what you're going to get in the course. But if it what we go through and what Bob talks about are what are the best leader? What's the characteristics of a leader, of a great leader? And people just come up and they talk about it, and then there's all kinds of things, and you can come up with what really resonates with you, and it's based on your experiences. You may be asking a colleague or a friend what they think your best characteristics are, people you trust, people in your family, but you may also want to recall significant experiences in your life where you actually feel like you made an impact, that you really felt good about what you did, and what is the reason why. And those are the things that are going to come up to the surface in terms of what is your leading value that you're going to be writing down. So these are some of the kind of things that you're going to be seeing, that people do say about themselves, and maybe some of these resonate with you, but there may be more than what's on here. And the other, on the alternative side, is you may be looking at what are the worst characteristics, and if I can go to the next one, of bad leaders. And if you can also think about scenarios where you had that crippling moment, in leadership, where you wanted to cringe and hide, and or you had an experience that was just horrible in your life, and everybody goes through their ups and downs, and what was it about it that was so harsh on you, and how can you define a leadership value based on that, and how can you get better? What are the values that you want to improve on? Sometimes you want to include that on there and always live by that value. So those are kind of the things that we talk about, and for sake of time, we're not going to go into it very deep, but go ahead,
Yeah,
Bob.
absolutely. And one of the things that we talk about is a lot of leadership skills I learned in the military. And we always say that you learn as much about leadership from seeing effective leadership in action, but you still learn from the ineffective leaders in what you don't want to be doing. So that's where some of that list really comes in handy as well. So, based on this list that you'll develop around good and bad leadership characteristics, then you kind of come through and you look at your own style and personality. And so you'll come back from that and say, okay, of these things that I think are really important to do and I think are really important not to do, what do I do well? And do a really critical self-analysis about what do I think I do well? And you also have to do a deep dive and be perfectly frank and honest with yourself of what are the things that you don't do very well and what do you need to work on in terms of leadership development. You still think that they're important, but you know that you're not as good at it as you ought to be. And then you got to look at what would matter to your team that you were leading in terms of what would you think their expectations would be? Because those are the characteristics that you really want to have. You don't lead in a vacuum, you lead other people. And so it's really important to think about the team that you are leading or potentially will lead and understanding what matters to them, because in the end that's really what leadership is. It's the leadership over your team. And then finally, what are implicit values that you feel are representative? You've gone through this list. Now let's break it down into those values. If you say that communication is important, then how do you put that into a value statement? or how do you put that into a value component? One of mine is that a value is I will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate people who do. And that's where I get the value honor. So, and then finally, you're going to write out kind of the top 4 or 5 values because another terminology for this is a leadership compass. I like to, not always, but I like to try to put it in at 4 is at least a baseline because that gives you the cardinal directions of a compass. And that just seems to make sense in terms of how you're developing it. And so based on that, you'll kind of come around to what are your true values based on what were good leaders, what are bad leaders, what's important for your team, what do you do well, what do you not do very well, and then how do you turn those into values, which will be the basis of how you write your philosophy.
Yep. And then before you go into this, Bob, I just wanted to say I love the fact that you not just state the values and the word communication, you also put it into a verb because values are really action. They're actionable items. And so it's not just communication. Yes, communication is the core of your value, but within that word defines your value. It's not just that communication is my value. It means that I don't lie. I don't do this. I am upfront with you. I'm transparent. That's your true value because it's not
Yep,
just communication. So I like the fact that you put action into it. And that's what this whole leadership philosophy statement's about that he's going to show you.
absolutely.
Go ahead, Bob.
So the leadership philosophy, this is the format, and you'll see it in mine. So I really break it into the format. The reason I break it into this particular format is because if you follow the format, you're going to cover all of your bases in terms of what I discussed earlier. One is a purpose statement, is really kind of a broad general statement about leadership, where it comes from, why I'm doing it. Personal values, again, remember we've talked about that several times. Context is kind of where did you come up with the values? Where do you have your background, your experience? And then a statements of I will. Here are the things just flat out. And this is kind of where Elsie was talking about that I've taken my values and put them into these are the actions that I'm going to carry out that will fulfill those values. Then you do a little bit of a transition statement into the team itself. And then you have a what I expect. These are the things that I expect from the team. And again, it is not a repeat of their job description. It is really what do I expect of the team in terms of them fulfilling their obligation to be a member of the team. Pet peeves and idiosyncrasies, I've already talked about. What are the absolutes that you're just not going to tolerate? And then kind of an inspirational conclusion where it gets everybody kind of aligned and pepped up to be a member of that team and come forward as a team member fulfilling their obligations. And we'll see that here in a second.
Okay. Sorry, there's a little. There it goes.
There we go. So, this is actually my personal leadership philosophy. This is taken directly out of the book that I wrote, along with Dennis Haley, who is a Naval Academy graduate. It's hard for me to say that being a West Point graduate. They're supposed to be our arch enemy. But this is my leadership philosophy. There are several other examples in the book, but this is mine. So you can see I start with the purpose is why did I provide you with a leadership philosophy in the first place so that you'll understand how I want to inspire the team, how I will fulfill my role, and what's important about a leadership climate. And that's one of the things that I think is really important that I have seen lots of organizations do well and lots of them not do well. And the leadership climate to me is the common denominator. If there's not strong leadership development, and a strong respect for leadership, then organizations, in my opinion, are doomed to fail. If you think of all the great leadership organizations that are known for kind of their successes, all of them invest a lot in their leadership process. Then the next thing you have are my personal values. Remember, I said service, honor, encouragement. I think is really important that We don't belittle each other, that even when we have corrective actions and difficult conversations, that we are encouraging about how we carry those out. Interesting point is it's the end of the fiscal year, so we're doing evaluations now. And one of my directors came to me with some wording around one of my managers, and we went through it and step by step looked at how do we make it encouraging. Compassion, which I think is really important, especially in healthcare. It's something we're all supposed to be good at in healthcare. And then teamwork, I think, is very important. And then context is kind of my background, and it talks a little bit about that. I've worked in the military, I've worked in the corporate world, and then, of course, I've worked in healthcare for quite some time now. And my leadership philosophy really pulls from all of those elements and my experiences in each.
Yep. And I just want to say before I go on, that Bob, who have you shared this philosophy statement with, and what kind of difference has it made because of that? Before you go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I said a little bit earlier, that
Mhm.
I want to be held accountable to this. So I actually share this with every member of my division. So that would be a little more than 30 people that report either directly to me or they report to somebody who reports to me, and that's about to grow next week, which I'm happy to say.
Right.
And so some people have this. My leadership philosophy actually on their bulletin boards. I have a lot of folks that work in cubicles and they've got my leadership philosophy tacked up in front of them. I've had people ask for another copy of it as we've talked about it periodically. So I share it with everybody on my team. Now, I also share it with all of my peers. So I'm on the senior leadership team of the hospital. So I have operations, finance, a human resources vice president, chief nursing officer. We have a legal counsel on our senior leadership team. And of course, my boss, the chief executive officer of the hospital. All of them also have a copy of my leadership philosophy. Of note, with permission, I included my boss's leadership philosophy in the back of the book as well. So his is there. I did not know he already had one when I shared it with him, mine with him. He turned around and gave me his own, and he already had it written. It wasn't
And
from my
what was
boss.
the kind of feedback you got from people when you showed it to them?
It's actually interesting at first, and I kind of talk about this a little bit in the book, is that when you first share the leadership philosophy, a lot of people don't know what to do with it. So it really is a guide that it's a working tool, a tool that you solicit feedback about. If you see things that are part of your personal idiosyncrasies or people not meeting expectations of the team, you refer back to this as the guidepost in which you shared it with in the first place.
Yep. And Bob, I didn't mean for you to read this whole thing out to
I,
everyone, but I just wanted
I
to
won't.
show everyone kind of what you've done. And I was
Yep.
impressed with the stories that you told me when during COVID, even when people came to you and said they understood what you stood for and they respected you during the time when there was a lot of need for help in the clinics and whatever. And they said, no, you stop. You don't need to come in. You need to do what you
Right.
need to do, and we'll do what we can do, with the patients. So I love that story, and the fact that you set expectations from the front, and that's what this is all about, right? These
Oh,
are
absolutely.
expectations.
Absolutely what the expectation is what it's about. And then you could see from the format that we had, again, these are the things I'll do. There's the transition part, and then here's what we expect of our team. And we hold each other accountable for those expectations as
And
well.
one of the things that really stuck out to me was it's this part: disagreements, arguments, and protests are welcomed, right? We're
Yes,
welcoming disagreement, but do it early. Once the decision is made, it's essential we have unified support. I love that.
absolutely.
Love that.
And you talk about COVID and how that, policies changed so fast, especially in the healthcare setting. And there are times when I was the disagreeer at like our incident command level, and I was the one who had to toe the line in terms of what our policy was going to be, even if logically I didn't agree with it. Absolutely, I think that's incredibly important for any team in terms of their effectiveness.
Right.
And
And
then
then,
here's the finest. Remember, I said at the end, this last paragraph that's on the bottom of this is kind of the inspirational quote. And in healthcare, generally speaking, it's easy to come up with inspirations because it's really about helping people,
yep,
whether you're at the bedside or if you're supporting those people that are at the
love
bedside.
that.
It
Yep.
really comes down to patience.
Right. So in conclusion, this is his book, and like I said before, Bob is on faculty and he teaches this, and he would go into more depth on what we just give you a little taste of what you would get if you joined us. I just want to tell you that we are starting July 12th, so if you're interested, stay on. Otherwise, you can hop off this call, but this orientation starts July 12th, and this whole premise of lead physician, this 3-month course, is that it's fun. It's not homework. Like, there's no tests. You're going to be given something to do to help you with your personal struggles, to make life easier, so that it's fun. So you develop relationships. You know how to communicate. You know how to engage people. You know how to inspire. Just, these are things that we weren't taught, and the building blocks of leadership is really building relationships, networking, your experience. And that's what this is all about. We're going to be showing you how to set goals, how to set a vision, how to be in alignment with your organizational vision, but also your personal vision for your office, and writing out that statement so that it's in the forefront of your minds. You know what you're going to achieve. What are the right kind of goals to set? How do you lead with values? Like we talk about thinking strategically, which we often don't do. We just are like ants on the ground doing our work, and we don't think of the broad aspect of what we're trying to accomplish. And managing your time, overcoming obstacles and setbacks, communicating effectively, engaging your employees, improving processes and workflows, change management, running successful meetings so that people are really clear about the message that's being delivered, and you're organized and you're doing things fairly. You're setting clear expectations. You're showing up with your own personal leadership style, thing that you're interested in. Calendly.com/Dr. Coco Co. Coco is my nickname. That's how you set up the call. Email me tonight or tomorrow, okay, at info@drlcco.com. So people have the kind of things people are asking about. What are some of the kind of before and afters? So the before and afters that we've seen have been tremendous. And I have not had one person say that they didn't get a lot out of it. Actually, we do assessments now, and I should post that. But the before and afters in terms of the ratings have been phenomenal, where people actually feel more self confident. They feel like they're actually able to step up into the leadership roles. They're able to network with people like never before. Their bosses are saying to them, "There's something different about you. I don't know what it is," and people notice that, and people are getting promoted. People are actually, when I follow these people out and we're working on them, because alumni still come back, is that they're building businesses that they wouldn't have otherwise, that they're moving into homes that their dream homes that they wouldn't have before, that they're asking for raises that they haven't before. So it's amazing how much we don't do because we're not even aware of what's holding us back. And that's what it's all about: leading your life and leading others, so that you live just a lot more enriching, more fulfilling life than you would otherwise. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, you
Any
bet.
other
Nice
last
to be
words,
here.
Bob, for us?
I would just, I went through this the very first cohort that we did when I started teaching, and it's applicable. And you alluded to it. It's applicable in your personal life and in your professional life, and I think that's really key.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.